Welcome back to Mornings with the Mayor. I'm your host, Mayor Robert Dye. It's good to be back. I know we've taken a little bit of time off, but with budget season and a whole bunch of different things going on, we have to find time to balance what's happening in our community, what's important, and given some of the state of the world right now, what's happening, with the hurricane in Louisiana, people from Houston, taking measures to kind of evacuate, even Farmers Branch has taken some of them just in an effort of we didn't know what was going to happen, how big the impact was going to be. But we as cities, we like to be ready. And the only way that we are ready to deal with stuff like this is having an emergency management specialist. So I thought, what better time to bring in our own Miss Lauren Sanchez for a conversation not only about her and her life and how she got to where she got to, but also, how do we deal with these types of situations? What's it like preparing for situations that we never want to happen, but we need to understand what we're going to do when a moment of crisis and something unexpected hits. And so, today just want to say, hey, Lauren, how's it going? Welcome to the show.
Yeah, good morning. Thanks for having me. I'm excited for this.
Yeah. So how's everything been going? I know you probably have been busy the last few days prepping and planning for what's kind of hitting, the Gulf Coast right now, both mostly on the Louisiana side right now, but there was a lot of fear that this was going to impact Texas as well, especially Houston. And given some of the history that Houston has had with storms of this magnitude, there might have been like a heightened sense of, hey, we've seen this before. We need to be ready. We know what we need to do. And it seems like measures have been put in place. And so, how's some of that been treating you, as well as just trying to balance normal things in Farmers Branch?
Yeah, definitely. It has been busy. This year, I think, has been a model of what emergency management is, right? Because for the first time in our history, we're dealing with a global pandemic.
Yeah.
We've been busy managing that, helping the city respond to that and make sure everyone has what they need. And then, of course, this past week, Mother Nature said, no, that wasn't enough. We're going to give you a Cat 4 hurricane. And yeah, like you said, the Gulf Coast is no stranger to hurricanes. We had Harvey just 3 years ago, which is good in the sense that people are still prepared. People still remember how bad it was and what they need to do to prepare themselves now. So I think that helped. We saw a lot of people evacuate ahead of this hurricane, which definitely helped. The damage is lower than it could have been, which is also a good thing. Texas didn't get as hit as hard as we thought we were going to. Sadly, Louisiana took the brunt of it. But even up here in North Texas, we've been frantically preparing via Zoom, daily calls with the state, with the region, with our local partners, because we shelter evacuees. So a lot of people are like, well, you're not on the coast. You don't do anything. And actually we do. So the state calls us and they say, hey, we're sending you 40 buses. Tell us where to send them. So the past couple of days has been busy for us trying to figure out what hotels we're going to send people to, because in the age of COVID, we can't open a 5,000 person shelter like we typically would. So it's been different. It's been a learning curve for us as well, but it's been going pretty smoothly so far, which is good.
Well, yeah, no, and that's good to hear. And what's interesting is when I started as mayor, you were just starting out as well. And Harvey had just kind of hit, and you're trying to show me, what a command center looks like. And I know we took the trip out to Garland to interact with, the District 13 team in North Texas, but also, how are we coordinating all of our efforts and the resources that we were sending down to Houston during Hurricane Harvey, to deal with this same kind of thing? And so, yes, while, you kind of been through it, it was also part of the learning curve and understanding how do all the teams work? Like, what mechanisms do we need? How do we request funding from FEMA and do all this stuff for resources that we're sending down there to help? But also being a part of how Texans, we've always seemed to come together in moments of crisis to help out our neighbors. It's just what's great about us. And I know that we were prepared and ready for this one. Seeing some of that in just our readiness to react and be a part of the team to help everyone out. I just think, while it was a challenging situation, especially during your first couple of years, how did that kind of experience help you in terms of coming up the learning curve quickly, but then also in real time having to deal with, not only FEMA, but, other governments, other municipalities, how they operate to kind of manage this situation, especially so early in your career?
It was difficult at the time to come in just recently graduating with my master's in emergency management and homeland security. So I've seen all of this on paper before, and I know kind of how it's supposed to go. So coming to Farmers Branch and then Harvey hitting and having to manage that was definitely a trial by fire. And looking back, I don't think I would have changed it one bit because it forced me to learn exactly how things work in real life, which shockingly is different than how they tell you in school things are going to play out. So I loved it. And the really good thing about Farmers Branch and the MetroCrest cities is that we work so closely together. So I called a lot of those emergency managers probably multiple times a day and just said, hey, here's what I'm dealing with. What would you do? Or how would you work this out? So we worked really closely together and that helped. And we still have a really strong relationship like that today. But the real life experiences definitely got me to where I am now. And I never thought that moving to Farmers Branch, which was a city I'd never heard of, living other places in Texas until I got here, never thought I'd have all these disasters under my belt in just the 3 short years that I've actually been here, but I wouldn't change it. It's sad that they happened, but it was definitely a way for me to learn how to do my job better.
That's awesome. Yeah, no, you touched on it, but receiving the theory from school and trying to take theory and apply it to what is actually happening, which in real time is definitely chaos in terms of how fast things move. It reminds me of the Mike Tyson quote, everyone has a plan until they get hit in the face, which in a moment of crisis and in a moment of emergency, that is getting hit in the face. And you don't know what's going to break, how it's going to break, how you need to respond, but having to plan and prepare for just a myriad of issues, I think is probably the most challenging part of your job, in my opinion, in terms of what could go wrong, how are we going to counter this, how are we going to be ready, what resources do we need, just all those plans. I think it's fascinating to, be able to, I guess, plan and prepare, as you, I think, put it before. We're planning for things we never want to happen.
Exactly.
And, I know that this year has definitely been an interesting year. Just, it seems with each month, it's, I saw the meme the other day that was like, who picked, hurricanes for August? Like, what was the thing in 2020 that was just going to continue to make it just a very difficult year for so many people? And, we're in hurricane season, so we could all anticipate that, yes, there was going to be some impact from this, but, it just seems like until we get through this, like, what's going to happen next month? What's the issue that we're all going to have to deal with? Yeah. It's in the period of a pandemic. We got a lot of stuff going on with the national election and everything else that it's an interesting time to be alive for sure. 2020, which, it's funny that all these crazy things are happening in a year that when you say 2020 is usually regarded as looking at something with clarity. And there's clearly no clarity going on right now at all. So it's fascinating. But when you talk about life experiences, I want to touch on you. I've gotten to know you over the years, which is great, but you also did a piece in I think it's Voyage, right? Or is it Voyage? Yeah. That kind of touched on your path from a child to where you are today. And so just kind of want to maybe touch and let people who didn't have an opportunity to read that great article and that great piece on you, about your early life and, finding your way to where you are now. And so what was it like, having to move around a lot and seeing some of the things that you saw going into foster care? And then, I think you said at the age of 10, finally getting adopted and then, having that stabilized family for those years and kind of working through that and then getting into college. What was that like for you?
It's interesting. Of course, at the time I was a kid and I was like, oh, this is normal. Everyone goes to foster care, right? Everyone has a dad who's in prison. This is normal. So it's interesting now as an adult to look back. And especially when I got to participate in that article with Voyage, to actually put pen to paper and write down a lot of things and see how it compares to the job that I'm doing now with helping people. It really made me realize like, I think that did definitely shape me into the person that I am now. So the story's interesting. I'll give you a little taste of it if you want. So born and raised in Southern California. My dad was incarcerated pretty much my whole childhood. And my mom was an addict and an alcoholic, but was still around for the most part. And so we did move around a lot, pretty much every year. I did the math one time and realized that I had started a new school from 2nd grade all the way to 9th grade. So I envy people who have childhood friends because I really wish I would have had that. But we moved a lot, which was fine. It really made my brother and I, who's a year younger, become really close. We did this whole thing of childhood together, which was cool. Our mom and her boyfriend would get arrested on multiple occasions for just various charges. So when that happens and there's kids involved, they can't leave you up, unfortunately, which is probably what I wish they would have done. Like, oh, just leave us here. We'll be fine. So they put us in foster homes. So we were in and out of a few foster homes, maybe a handful of times for a couple days, maybe to a couple weeks until my mom could get custody again. And like I said, it was normal. So we didn't bat an eye at that. And then one day my mom decided, let's move to Alaska. So we packed up from Southern California and loaded in the back of a U-Haul and drove all the way to Anchorage, Alaska. And funny story on that, every time we stopped to eat a meal on the side of the road from a little fire that we would build, we ate mac and cheese. And so to this day, I cannot stand mac and cheese. Like, don't bring it around me. I can't eat it anymore. But we got to Alaska, enrolled in school. And then the state of California realized, like, oh, those kids that were in foster care, we're in charge of them now and they're not here anymore. So they tried to track us down. They found out we were living in Alaska. That was a no-no. My mom didn't ask the state of California for permission to take us from the state. So I'm assuming state agents most likely flew to Alaska, pulled us out of school. I'm probably 9 at this point. So they take us out of school. We go to a local police department and they're like, here's your mom. Please say bye to her. We're taking you back to California. And so, of course, my mom's like, oh, don't worry. Come get you. Don't worry. So we happily got on this airplane and flew back to California. So it was my brother and I. We arrive in California in the middle of the night, go to a foster home, and it's for the Sanchez family. So we get introduced to them, and we end up living with them for 3 years. And I'll admit that I probably wasn't the nicest foster kid at first because I was, waiting on my mom to come get me. And luckily, the Sanchez family was super patient. And my older sister was back in the picture. She got court permission to have visits with us on the weekend. So over time, I realized like, oh, my birth mom isn't coming back. This is my new family. So things got a lot better. I'm glad that they were so patient with us. And so when I was 13, they asked if we wanted to get adopted. And of course we said yes. So we went to the courthouse and I signed the paperwork and I became Lauren Sanchez.
That's pretty incredible. And I guess, hearing that, like you said, for those first 3 years, you were kind of difficult. Like the only way I can relate to that is kind of through movies. And I think Mark Wahlberg and Rose Byrne, did Instant Family. And, the first week was kind of cool, but then, there was definitely some trials and tribulations after that, getting accustomed. And I think, from your standpoint, was it a trust aspect, or was it just getting comfortable to kind of realize, hey, there are people out here that care for me and my brother and, my sister, and, how, we can be a family and kind of move forward from that, because the foster family too had 2 other kids, right?
Yeah. So Ruth and Guillermo are my new parents. They have 2 siblings. So 2 children. So when we first moved in, they were infants at the time. So they grew up their whole life with us as part of their family, which is amazing. But yeah, I do agree with you. I think that it was probably a trust issue, right? Accepting that I am living with these people. They were also very structured, which was different for my brother and I. We had chores, and that was a whole new thing in my life. And we couldn't stay outside on our bikes until dark and then just come home whenever we wanted anymore. So that was an adjustment. And I think just letting go of my mom saying she was coming to get us. And it took me a long time to accept, like, this is a better life for you. Let them do what they want to do. So.
Yeah. So I guess, how did that, looking back, realizing that you had now that stability and that kind of trust circle of people you knew that were there for you, that were going to take care of you and help you kind of along the way, I guess, how did that kind of evolve and impact you
I attribute that actually to what I do now, what I chose to do for a job. Maybe not specifically emergency management, because not many people know what that is, but definitely the need for me to want to give back to people and help people. Because a lot of people helped me. I had a lot of really good social workers that would come visit us every week to make sure we were okay. I had a really good therapist as a kid that helped us work through all of that when we were in foster care. So I definitely had a lot of respect and admiration for those people and what they did for me during that time. And so I definitely see that in myself now. I love that as a part of my job, I get to go out and help people on what's probably some of the worst days of their life. So I do really enjoy that.
Yeah. And I was, I'm thinking back to, we've had conversations recently in the city about, engaging with the social navigator and working with people in the community that have mental health issues or are dealing with non-violent kind of crisis in terms of, some of the different things that are going on, not only in Farmers Branch, but the rest of the, DFW and the nation for that fact. That how was it beneficial? Did you have the same kind of caseworker and person that was coming to check on you through a period of time, or was it changing? And if it was consistent, how did that help as well in terms of trusting them and knowing that they're in your corner and fighting for your best interest?
Yeah, it did change a lot. I think foster care in the United States is way overwhelmed. So I applaud social workers. Growing up after, being adopted, I wanted to be a social worker for a really long time. So I was like, these people do some amazing work. Even though mine changed pretty often. Maybe I'd have one for a couple months, maybe it was a different person every time, but they always came in and were super interested in you and wanted to help. And even as a kid, I recognized that. So, but having the stability, I think, is important. So I mentioned that my older sister got court permission to come visit us. She's 14 years older. So when we were going through foster care and adoption, she was already out of the house living as an adult. So she was definitely our rock. We would see her all the time, and she was really good at, picking us up and taking us to a movie or go have lunch and just just be normal, have a normal outing. We don't need to talk about foster and social workers and, everything all the time. So that stability, was definitely there, and I'm glad that it was.
Well, that's awesome, because I know you two are still very close today. You go see her all the time and engage with your niece, and definitely try to spoil them as much as you can. But I guess having that stability and that transition and the decision to go to college, I guess what was that process like, and how did you choose the university that you ended up going to?
I really wish I had a cool story about how I chose Sam Houston State. After we were adopted, my parents decided that the newly grown Sanchez family was going to move to the hill country of Texas. We packed up and moved to Texas when I was in high school. And then it came time to choose a university. And I'm a first generation college student, so I didn't have anyone to really ask about this. And a girl that I went to high school with said, well, I'm going to Sam Houston and I'm going to study criminal justice. And I thought, that sounds pretty cool. I'm going to go to Sam Houston and I'm going to study criminal justice as well. So shout out to her for letting me copy her. It was a really good decision. I'm glad that I made it. So I ended up at Sam Houston State, studied criminal justice. So I got my bachelor's in 2015 with criminal justice and then a minor in Spanish, and then didn't know exactly what I wanted to do with that degree. So I stayed for my master's and went through the graduate program for Homeland Security Studies with a focus in emergency management. So that's how I ended up here. So it kind of just fell in line, but it worked out. Yeah,
you never know who the person is or the comment that's going to be made that, puts you on a completely different path in life and how that resonates with you. So it's cool that you had a friend that, you said, yeah, I'll go do that with you. It's going to be great. And here you are in that profession, something you never thought you were going to be a part of. But, as you said, when you were a little bit younger, you thought, hey, maybe, I would like to be a social worker or work in that realm, to where, it's related, right? Like they're dealing with crisis, you're dealing with crisis. And it's on a bigger scale, and it's not as intimate as one-on-one. Like you're dealing with community and large scale and taking care of a number of people, which, both are definitely admirable. And I know that, I guess what we've talked about kind of in the past is, and some of the things that you've done since is kind of working into, finding someone to talk with, to understand, where you came from, the mental aspects of that and how that's impacted where you kind of started to where you are now. And what was that process like in terms of finding someone that, you could reach out to and have these conversations and, just dive deep into who you are, to just have a better understanding of how you operate, and kind of how does that guide you now in terms of where you're going?
Yeah, no, that's an interesting question. I joke with my older sister often that she's my unpaid therapist, because I call her all the time, of course, and hey, here's what's going on and tell me what I should do. But maybe I felt bad that she wasn't being paid. So in 2020, everyone had a rough 2020, but I decided earlier this year that it was in my personal best interest to seek a therapist again. And I hadn't been in therapy since I was 10 years old in foster care. And she was great, but as a kid, I didn't take full advantage of it, of course. So now as an adult, when I sat down and found a therapist, the first thing I told her was, as a kid, I tried this and I lied, right? I didn't want to come to therapy. I would just say whatever the therapist wanted to say and she'd give me candy and I'd get to go home. But I told her, well, since I'm paying for it this time, like I'm going to take this real serious. So I have been seeing a therapist steady for 2020 and I plan to continue. And I really enjoy it. I like going. It's different than I thought. I was like most people who thought, well, nothing too big has happened to me, nothing bad. I don't need to go talk to anybody about my feelings. But then I realized that that's not what it's about at all. It's really just a conversation like we're having now. And they're trained to ask you some difficult questions that make you think about things that you never thought about before. And so that's what I enjoy about it. And I think that, therapy has a stigma. People don't like to talk about therapy. And I go and I love to tell people that I go to therapy because I want to be one of those people that helps break the stigma and encourage people. Anyone can go. It's really just about talking about your emotions and learning about yourself. And then you take what you learn and apply it to your life and things just get better.
Yeah. And, there definitely is a stigma. But I think when you break it back down, I mean, isn't that what the friends are too? It's someone that you can trust, that you can talk to. The difference is with a therapist, like you have someone that's trained in listening and actually hearing you and helping guide you forward with an interest of yourself, to where you don't always get that with your friends. It is a place of comfort, someone that you can talk to that can sympathize with what you're doing. But, I think it's, as the world changes and as we understand the mental aspect and how things play into things, like I think it's definitely become a lot more prevalent. The number of people that I know, like, immediate family members as well, that are doing the same thing. Like it's definitely beneficial. But what's kind of been the greatest takeaway, and what have you kind of felt has been probably the most difficult aspect of that journey?
Ooh, I can think of the difficult things first. It's definitely hard talking to a stranger. It was uncomfortable for me the first maybe 2 sessions that I went. So I understand why people are hesitant to go. It's not easy to open up. It's also not easy when they ask you things you've never thought about and you have to take a step back and go, oh, maybe that is something about myself, I've never realized before, and I don't know how to handle that. So it is uncomfortable, but I think you need to get pushed to being uncomfortable sometimes to better yourself. And therapy is a really good structured way to do that. But the good things, I definitely have learned a lot. I go continuously. I see the benefit of it. And then I take that, of course, for my personal life, but then also for work. So I've realized that I'm definitely a people person. I love to please people. That's why I love to respond to house fires and people need help. And I'm like, let me help you. Let me do all these things to try to make your day better. And sometimes that's emotionally taxing. There's been some responses that I've gone on that, I get home later that day and I'm just like, I'm beat. That was a tough day for me. So therapy has made me realize that, yes, I can care about other people, definitely, but I also need to take care of myself and realize that I need some time and I need to process everything. So that's something that I definitely take going forward.
Yeah, self-care is definitely important in terms of, just being able to operate and moving forward. But, understanding some of those aspects about yourself and some of the things that you've learned, like, have you been able to leverage some of those insights into how you deal with your job? I know you had a challenging situation over a year ago when there was the plane crash at the Addison airport and you had to set up kind of a crisis center. And I know maybe you hadn't started the process then, but, understanding some of these things about you and being able to talk to other people that are going through something traumatic and very difficult, has what you've learned kind of impacted you in a way that you found the way you engage with other people beneficial, or the way that you approach your job, or the way that you think about things? Has there been some kind of touch point there that you feel you've recognized some of that and been able to apply it not only to your job, but to your life and career going forward?
Yeah, I definitely think so. It made me, so therapy I love to help people. And I told my therapist that here's what I do for work and I love it. And this is the aspect of my job that I really enjoy. And of course, then the next question is, well, why do you think you enjoy doing that? So it starts taking you back in your life and you start realizing like, oh, all these social workers and maybe the trauma that I went through as a kid and the trauma that I've experienced, in whatever aspect of my life has made me recognize that in other people and want to help them because I know the benefits of somebody helping you. So we have talked about that at length, and I definitely still do that in my job, and I'm going to keep doing that. But yeah, I do enjoy talking to people, especially on their hardest day, because I want to be that person that helps them and makes it just a little bit better.
Yeah. So, I mean, and speaking of the Addison experience, and I think what's great about that is they had a difficult situation, but because our communities work together, right? Like we were able to lend one of our resources, you to help them navigate that quickly, efficiently. And the way I've come to understand it and just reading through everything, handled it very well. And despite a horrible and tragic event, there was, I think, as best of a successful outcome as you could hope for. But, I also think we received that same help from Carrollton, right? Like when we had that tornado at Villa Creek Apartments, right? Elliot came in and, kind of helped with Chief Parker and everything that was going on. And so it's good to see that teamwork. But, what was your experience of the Addison situation? Because I think that's probably the most direct and impactful event that this kind of happened where it's true crisis. You're dealing with families that are, definitely devastated and needing answers. We don't have answers. What was that like?
It was tough. But then on the other hand, I love that I got to help. So it was June 30th of last year. There was a fatal, tragic plane crash in Addison at their airport with 10 fatalities. And I remember hearing about it, and I called their fire chief, David Jones, and said, hey, I know you probably have this covered, but if you need any of my help, please just let me know. And he was like, I don't know if I really need anything. And I was like, well, have you considered this, this, and this? And he's like, actually, I haven't. Go ahead and just drive on over. So I got permission from then Chief Parker. And he was always a super proponent of us helping each other out. The Metro Crest cities work super closely together, which I love. So I drove to Addison and basically assumed the emergency management role for the town because they don't have a dedicated emergency management specialist like Farmers Branch does. Their fire chief does both. He wears both hats, which in that situation, he couldn't do both. He was on a fire scene.
Yeah.
So I responded. I took over all correspondence with the county. So the county judge Jenkins ended up showing up. So I talked to him and briefed him on what was going on so that he was aware. And then we realized that with 10 fatalities, that's a lot of worried friends and family. And you can't just leave these people out there with nowhere to go. So it's a pretty new concept of a family assistance center is what we set up. This is actually the first one to ever be set up in Dallas County. And luckily it went really well. So myself and a lot of other really great local and also federal organizations set this up at the Addison Conference Center. So I was there at the building, getting it ready, putting out chairs, setting up food and water. And actually one of the victims' fathers, so he wasn't on the plane, but he had 3 family members who were on the plane. And he comes in full tears and grabs me and is like, please tell me, did anybody survive? Please tell me, please tell me. And I wasn't allowed to say anything at this point, which killed me because here's this guy who needs my help and I can't give him what he wants. So I told him, I promise I'll have an update for you soon. Let me get you some water. Let me, please sit right here, get comfortable. Do you have anyone that can come sit with you? And I held it together and I'm still shocked that I did. And as soon as I walked away, I ran outside and lost it. So then I wiped off the tears and luckily had no makeup on that day and walked right back in and finished working this center for 2 days. So at the end of the 2 days, about 40 friends and family had come through. So it was a big deal. I'm glad that we did it though. A lot of people, because we'd never done it before, were questioning why we need a center like this. We've never done it. They'll be fine. But I think now people are understanding the importance of it. So this was a safe place for everyone to go. The media is not there to try to ask you questions. It's a central location for you to get all the disaster information that you need, but also resources. So do you need help with funeral arrangements? Do you need financial help? Do you need counseling assistance? And all these awesome organizations were there just giving out this information. So tragic, super tragic event. The town of Addison handled it very well. And it's crazy that it was over a year ago already.
Yeah, it's, it seems like I can remember it being last summer, but yeah, it definitely seems like it was more recent than it actually was. But, being able to articulate to, Chief Jones, hey, have you thought about this and this? Did you learn that from previous case studies or and just doing research on your own, or, having gone through it? And as you stated, first one kind of set up in Dallas County, have you thought too about, is this a case study worth writing in terms of here's what was successful, here's where some of the challenges, here's some things that, hey, we need to learn and can be better on, in terms of how not only Farmers Branch can respond to situations like this, but other communities as well in terms of what was learned. Like, I guess, how did that come together? And then what was the results of that afterwards in terms of being able to educate other people on the need and benefits of setting up a kind of a resource like this?
Yeah, no, both very good questions. So interestingly enough, and I'm really grateful that it worked out this way, about a month before, the NTSB, the National Transportation Safety Board, who was actually the federal agency who came to Addison because it was a plane crash, they have jurisdiction over this. They actually came to DFW about a month before and had a class about family assistance centers. And I'd heard about it before and never had a class on it. So I signed up, and for a couple of days I sat in this training and wrote lots of notes and was kind of like, oh, this is a cool concept. We've never seen it in practice here. Let me just remember it in case we ever need it. And sadly, a month later, we needed it. And so when we called the NTSB, it was the same instructor who had come to teach me. So she walked in the door to take over the center from me, and we knew each other. I'm like, hey, great class about a month ago. Now this is yours. Let's do it for real. So that worked out. So I'm a huge proponent of training, and I love to sign up for any kind of hands-on training that I can get. So that worked out, and we'd actually practiced it maybe 2 weeks before. So emergency managers in the Dallas area got together and used a school on a weekend. It was closed, and we got together and set it up, and we had volunteers come through and act like friends and family of the victims, and we practiced what this would look like. So it helped. The timing really worked out for it. And then on the other end of it, tons of lessons learned from what this looked like, us being the first ones to set it up, right? We had a lot of knowledge to give. So I actually came back to the city and wrote it as a plan, put it all on paper. Here's what it looks like. Here's what you need to, here's who you need to call. And then I shared it with the region. We had a regional emergency managers meeting, and I said, hey, here's what we did. We're going to give up and give a little testimony of exactly how it went. And here's the plan that I wrote. So if you want it and you want to just type in your jurisdiction's name instead of mine, shoot me an email. So that's the good thing about emergency management too, is we love to plagiarize with permission. So I sent it to them, and now everyone has it in case they have to stand one up.
Hey, imitation is the greatest form of flattery, some have said. So, I think that's great. And, it reminds me of, how beneficial, we are in Farmers Branch, that we have a city manager and chiefs that are so invested in investing in our people and allowing them to take, these, additional classes or things that we need that might be a resource, something that we need to learn. I mean, you look at it in terms of here's the bare minimum of hours that, normal police, officers take, for just their CTEs and continuing their education. But we go way beyond that, like almost sevenfold. And I think that's across all departments, because knowledge is one of our greatest resources. And so knowing that we have staff that's so knowledgeable, but it's not only the knowledge, it's the willingness to take that on and go above and beyond, I think is what's impressive, and why we were able to respond and act, and why our fire department and police departments are all regarded with such esteem because of situations like this. But, I know that kind of, you took that class and it kind of maybe fell into your lap at the right time. You never know when you're going to need something, and somehow things always find us when we need them most. Yes. But it also reminds me of looking into, you went to the class because you had never seen it, thought you might need to know it. Here we go. What other things are you looking at now? Like, what is the future of EMS as we're starting to have more wildfires, more hurricanes, more, bigger tornadoes and storms and things as our climate is kind of changing? How is that evolving, and how are you preparing, and where do you kind of see it going in the future? Because I'm curious to know as well, because I, like you, believe you have to plan for what could happen, even though we hopefully never need it. But, but you have to have some foresight there. You have to have a look of where it might be going and trending, and just wondering what your thoughts are on that, and where we as a community might need to possibly think long-term about some of these items.
Mm-hmm. No, great question. I think there's a couple trends. I think the first one is emergency management as a profession is going to boom. Like, it's been growing over the past couple of years and more people are familiar with what it is, but I think it's just going to get bigger. When I introduce myself to people and say, I'm an emergency management specialist, I just get a blank stare back because nobody knows what that is and what I do and that I even exist. But I think it's going to change, and people typically just see us when a disaster occurs. So I think we need to change that. I try really hard to get in the public and do lots of trainings. So I think there's a few more people in Farmers Branch that know who I am, which I appreciate. But I think as a whole, the profession's going to get bigger. Exactly like you said, we're having more catastrophic disasters than we've ever had before, which warrants more emergency managers. And I think jurisdictions and even private businesses, NASA even has an emergency manager. So I think people are going to realize this is an asset. We need to have someone who can do this type of planning and training in case something happens. So I think that's one of the trends. The other trend is going to be for planning and training, just like you brought up. Our planning is good. We've been doing it for a long time, but it needs to change slightly with the changing disasters. So like you mentioned, they're getting bigger with climate change, but also just we're really built out, which means when we get hit by a tornado, there's so much more damage and debris than we've ever had to manage before. We rely so heavily on technology that now when a cyber attack occurs, we're crippled. We can't do much. And then even with the world being so connected as it is, this is the first global pandemic we've ever seen where every country is getting hit at the same time. So I think we need to take into account those kinds of bigger, badder challenges. And so writing it on paper is one thing. That's kind of the easy step of my job, but then getting people together to train on it is going to be really important. So we haven't done very many cyber attack trainings, because how do you train on that, right? I might just get a bunch of people in the room and say, bring your laptop. Now close your laptop. Now try to do your job. And maybe that's the training to figure out how we can do everything without technology if that were to ever happen. So my plan is to change the topics of what we're training on, make them worst case scenario. And then once we have worst case scenario, then I'm going to throw another disaster right on top of it, just like we're seeing right now with COVID and a hurricane. We know how to shelter. We've sheltered people for hurricanes for years. And this was the first time that we haven't been able to put people in a standard shelter. So that was the conversation earlier this week of, well, what do we do? We can't put people in a building. So hotels, of course, were a good alternative. So at the city level, and cities across the nation are going to do that. They currently do. But we need to get together and start thinking of the worst thing possible. So if anyone has any ideas of how crazy things can get, send them to me and we're going to train on it. But the last thing too, another trend that I've been pushing, but I'm going to need a lot of help from the public, namely. So this is my call to service for you. I think the public needs to be trained on personal disaster preparedness. So I do classes a couple of times a year. Typically, COVID threw a wrench in that, so I haven't had one for 2020. But it all begins at a personal level in your home. So do you know what to do? Do you know where to shelter in your house? Do you have a disaster kit with food and water and money that you can grab if everything in your house gets destroyed? Do your kids know what to do if something happens when you're not at home? So I think that's the biggest push, right? And if you look down at the Gulf Coast right now, a lot of people evacuated. There's a lot of people that didn't evacuate. And they were told, if you don't evacuate and you call 911 for help, we won't be able to get to you. So I really hope that those people thought about this and had all the stuff in place. And I want us to do that too. I want everyone in Farmers Branch to know exactly what they're going to do if something were to happen. So our biggest threat is tornado. So think of a tornado and think of the worst thing that could happen with the tornado. And I want you to make a checklist for yourself and make sure that you can handle all of that. Because 911 will come to you, but it might take us a while to get there.
Yeah. And, I think that's important. And I know you do tons of different trainings around the community, not only for residents, for staff, with the chamber and anyone else that might need it. And I would hate to put more work on Tom and his amazing team. But, is it a valuable resource to take some of those lessons? Just because I think about, almost 50,000 people, how are you going to ensure that everyone is understanding some of this? But, is there kind of, potentially a medium for a video series or just infographics and other things that can kind of be shared and disseminated and sent out that are just easy resources for people to kind of understand and learn and say, hey, we've put these out there. We also offer these classes. We do other things, because, you got to think about different ways to meet people where they are instead of them coming to meet you where you are all the time. And so, definitely some opportunities there. But, how is it with, you did the video kind of on the active shooter and how to, go through some of that, but you've also taught classes on that and work with different departments and some of those things. What's been your experience with some of those, and what's the feedback been from a lot of the community members from that? And, luckily we haven't really needed it, but it's definitely rather be prepared than not. Yeah. So, how's some of those been? Because I know you also do CPR classes too, right? And some of those other, yeah.
So like you've named a few, we offer a ton of different trainings, and not just myself, other people in the fire department offer other ones. I work really closely with our police department. So I partner with the police department. They teach civilian response to active shooters, and I follow it up with Stop the Bleed. So that's how to use a tourniquet, how to apply bandages to a wound that's bleeding out so that you don't bleed out. So we pair those ones up together. I do teach CPR. I don't certify anyone in CPR. We have another firefighter who can do that. So if someone needs a certification, they go to him. But if you or your business or your church or your volunteer group that's in Farmers Branch just wants to know how to do CPR, give me a call. I do it often. The disaster preparedness one I do for businesses. So I scale it to businesses and how you need to prepare and have a plan and back up all your data and know who to call for your employees. And then I also do personal preparedness. So you at your house, what do you need to do? It's a little different than a business, but a lot of the same stuff applies. So there's tons of trainings. The age of COVID has forced me to rethink how I do things. So we are in the works of making videos of some of these. There is a video already out there of the personal preparedness one. I believe it's already on YouTube, but I'll find out and we'll push that out to people. It's about an hour long because it covers everything. But if you're interested and want this and don't want to wait for me to schedule one, there's one on YouTube of me talking already out there. But the plan is to make more videos like that are readily available for people to watch. And then my goal is for maybe a business or a group to get together, watch the video, and then we'll set up a Zoom call afterwards with me where you can ask any and every question you've ever thought of. So I want it to still be interactive, and I don't want to wait until the pandemic's over before I get back out to teach people. So that's my plan moving forward.
Yeah, and that's the name of the game right now is how are we evolving? How are we dealing with this? But also, I look at in some way, shape, or form when we're in uncomfortable situations and when things are difficult, that's when we are often our most innovative and able to find creative solutions that allow us to move forward in hopefully a much more efficient and better way. And so, filming some of these videos, doing some of that, I think it's great work and along the lines of how we're meeting people where they are rather than vice versa. But, I'm sure we can get the creatives on this team to drop a little link at the bottom of some of these videos you've referenced so people can, spend another hour, listening to things you have to share to make their lives a little bit better. But, you've touched on a lot, and I've appreciated that, you guys come to me as, I think until I gave up control to Gabe, I was technically the head of, any situation that would have happened. And I was glad to give it up because you guys know way more than I do. But yeah, I think decisions ultimately come through me, but for the most part, I like to let the professionals run the show since you're in it day to day. I'm not trying to muddy anyone's water with anything that I might think that I know that I don't know for sure. But no, just completely. And, just grateful for you, what you do, and the benefit that you are to the community in terms of making sure that we're prepared and have a plan and safe, because we had a plan on our desk when COVID hit, when we were looking at shutting down, and modified in different ways that we need to act and move about the city. And I know there's been a lot of discussion about different things that we are allowing and not allowing, and they go through the multiple channels, but it feels like in Farmers Branch, we as a community have done a good job these past 6, 7, 8 months to allow people to live their life and hopefully do so in a safe way. But we're also taking care of kids through Parks and Rec. How are we opening up our libraries and our facilities to give people access to things that they, we all probably took for granted for a while. And that wouldn't have been possible without researching these plans and understanding what we need to be thinking about and engaging in and putting forward. And it's not only the theory, as you've said, behind them, it's how are you actually doing them in the field. And we have great team and people that are taking care of that to make sure that our people are safe while we're still allowed to have activities and go about our daily lives and hopefully keep businesses open and do other stuff. So just want to thank you for all your efforts in that regard and moving us forward. But, kind of with most of the conversations that I have, I try to get to a few, what I call kind of rapid fire questions that just kind of hit you with just a few kind of personal things. And so you're a resident of Farmers Branch.
I
think you could technically walk to the admin building over there.
I can see my house right there.
You can see your house. So, knowing that you're fully ingrained in the community, what's your favorite spot in Farmers Branch? Like, if you had to pick one place to just go, where would that be and why?
Favorite place to go? Probably Native Coffee. I'm a book nerd and I want to just go and sit at a cool coffee shop and read a book for a couple hours and drink coffee.
And that's good to hear, because that's completely on the other side of town from you. So
it is. Yeah, I drive the whole city to get there.
You never ride your bike all the way over there?
I haven't done it yet.
Yeah.
That kind of scares me on a bike, but I'm building up.
Okay.
Yeah.
We're working on it. We're putting some better trails and systems in place to make it a little easier for you to ride over there. So
I'll test them out for you.
Yeah, given that you are an avid reader and you read at like 1,000 words a minute, which is impressive, what is your favorite book and why? And what message did you take from that book that resonates with you so much?
Oh, that's such a hard one. I'm sorry for all the silence. Favorite book.
Yeah.
Favorite author is definitely Stephen King.
Okay.
Or thriller fan, love scary, all things scary. I could just name it's like Where the Crawdads Sing, and I can't think of who wrote that now, but that's on Reese Witherspoon's book club. So if anyone is a fan of reading and needs good titles, Reese Witherspoon has a book club that has really good books that I like to read. There's also one called Maud, which is also a very good book. I'll just rattle off names. You write these down, and
then I'll read them over the course of 5 years. That's how long it takes me to get through books. So, no, I mean, it is difficult. I can always say that The Fountainhead by Ayn Rand is one of my favorites, just because I've loved the individualistic nature of the book, and kind of the overarching message that I always received from it was, believe in what you believe in, and despite what other people tell you, if you believe in it wholeheartedly, keep working your path, and over time, through hard work and everything else, you will eventually find success. And that was kind of the main takeaway I took from the book. I know other people, have interpreted it differently and didn't always have that message, but the way I kind of read it and gravitated towards one of the main characters was, that was my piece of it, and something that I've always loved from that book and held with me for many years about how I approach things in life. So I know that.
Write that down. I'm going to read that book next.
Yeah, it took me. It's long. It took me a while, because I'll read, I'll get busy, I'll re-pick it back up and have to start back over. But maybe that's why I recognize it so much, is because in theory I probably read it 5 times while I was reading it one time. So, but other than that, given your time in California, given your time in Texas, given that you go back to California so much, I mean, is Texas still your favorite place, or is it
number one?
Number one.
I do love California. I'll never say a bad thing about California, except that I probably couldn't afford to live in California. But I do love Texas. People are so nice. And I don't say y'all. After living here for so long, I still say you guys. But when I go to California, everyone's like, wow, you have an accent. Where are you from? And I love that. I take it as pride that I have a Texas accent. I don't hear it, but they do. And I love it.
You've adapted more than I have. Apparently people say they don't know where I'm from because of my accent. So it's just that's a neutral accent. And I get the you all and the all of y'all. And I have family from the Northeast and from Pennsylvania, and they say yins. So,
Different.
depending on where you're at, you can tell where people are from based on how they try to phrase you all. So, it's an interesting short phrase that allow you to identify where someone might be from. So
that's so interesting that's the word. That's the word.
Yeah. Yeah. It's the small things that matter most sometimes, I guess.
Yeah.
But, I do want to, kind of thank you for your time, for your energy, the benefit that you provide, not only in our residents, but the rest of the Metro Crest area in terms of lending your services and working with other teams to ensure, the safety for all of us and that we're fully prepared. And I appreciate, you letting people know sometimes, hey, there's a big storm coming and be prepared. Even though it doesn't always play out, sometimes you're dead on the money, but, just appreciate the time and energy. Cause I know that, when you're an emergency management specialist, while you do have set hours, it's a full-time job because you never know when something's going to hit. So I just want to thank you for that and all that you do for our community. It's fantastic.
I'm glad to do it. I'm so glad to do it. Thanks for hiring me, Farmers Branch. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah. Well, you got to thank the people in your department,
Mm-hmm.
but they believed in you and you've done great stuff. So, it's been definitely a wonderful, at least 3.5 years since I've been here, just watching you work, keeping us safe. So yeah, just want to thank you for so many that don't always get to see what you do and the impact that you have. But, for everyone that's kind of watching, I just want to say, thanks for tuning in for Mornings with Your Mayor, host Robert C. Dye. We're doing our best to keep you updated, informed, and just kind of engaged in our community and what's going on. And so we'll be back next week with a new show, new topic. So until then, stay safe, be well, we'll talk soon. Thanks.